Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive.
hmm
Today we're going to be cracking open the book of 2 Samuel,
Oh.
chapter 24,
Yeah.
and a really fascinating story about King David, a census, and
Oh, yeah.
some pretty intense consequences.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of those stories that's packed with drama and wisdom that still speaks to us today.
I think that one of the things that's always intrigued me about this story is this question of motivation.
Mm-hmm.
You have King David at the height of his power,
Right.
and he decides to count his people.
Yeah.
Now, the text doesn't explicitly say why,
Right.
which really makes you wonder, like, what could possibly drive a leader to take such an action?
That's a great point. It's easy to kind of skim over those little details,
Yeah.
but they really are sometimes the key to understanding the whole thing.
Yeah.
Like, why would a king feel the need for a head count?
Well, some scholars suggest that it was a display of pride. Maybe he was feeling a little too self-assured, wanting to quantify his accomplishments.
Almost like wanting to see your power reflected back in a number.
Yes, exactly.
But it really backfired
It does.
in a big way.
Yeah, because in this context, taking a census was actually seen as an act of defiance against God. It's like saying, I got this, I don't need you.
Right.
And, that didn't sit well with the divine authority.
So this attempt to kind of solidify his power actually undermines it.
It does, and the consequences are severe.
Yeah.
God, angered by this display of pride and self-reliance, gives David 3 agonizing choices:
Wow.
famine, war, or pestilence.
Wow.
Each option more devastating than the last.
What a horrible situation to be in.
Yeah.
Forced to choose between 3 terrible evils.
Yeah.
What must have been going through David's mind at that moment?
We can only imagine the weight of that decision, but, realizing the gravity of his sin,
Right.
David chooses pestilence, placing his trust back in God's mercy.
So he's choosing what he sees as the most direct consequence.
Yes.
Hoping maybe for a swifter resolution. It's a pretty bold move, and perhaps a little desperate.
A move born out of humility,
Okay.
and yet the consequences are still devastating.
Mm-hmm.
The pestilence, a horrific plague, sweeps through the land, claiming the lives of 70,000 people.
It's hard to wrap your head around that kind of loss.
I know.
70,000 people. The impact of one leader's decision is just staggering.
It is.
But it's not the end of the story, is it?
No, it isn't just when the plague reaches Jerusalem, poised to destroy the city, God relents.
Wow.
He shows mercy, halting the destruction in its tracks. This blend of justice and compassion is a crucial element of the story, wouldn't you say?
It really highlights the complexity of the divine, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
There's this sense of righteous anger at David's actions.
Yes.
But also this overwhelming compassion
Right.
that steps in to prevent further suffering.
Exactly. It's a reminder that even in the face of our mistakes, there's always the possibility of grace. And David, deeply affected by this experience, doesn't just breathe a sigh of relief and move on. He builds an altar and offers sacrifices, demonstrating a profound understanding of the need for repentance and reconciliation.
It's like he's saying, I see the error of my ways,
Yes.
and I'm committed to making things right.
Precisely. And that act of seeking forgiveness, of taking concrete steps to repair the damage, is something that resonates deeply even today.
Yeah.
Think about your own life. Have you ever been in a situation where pride or self-reliance led you down the wrong path?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I remember this one time. And maybe we won't go into all the details.
Okay.
But let's just say it involved a DIY project, a ladder, and a slightly exaggerated sense of my own carpentry skills.
We've all been there. The important thing is what we do next.
Right.
Do we double down on our pride, or do we acknowledge our mistakes and seek to make amends?
I think that's where the real growth happens.
Yeah.
Is in that moment of humility when we're willing to say, you know what, I messed up.
It's not always easy, but it's essential. And it's not just about personal growth. Think about leaders today in all spheres of life. Their decisions, just like David's, have far-reaching consequences.
It makes you realize the weight of responsibility that comes with leadership.
It's about recognizing that our actions, even those seemingly small and insignificant, can have a ripple effect. And that's where humility becomes so crucial. It's not about diminishing ourselves, but rather about understanding our place in the larger scheme of things.
It's about recognizing that we're not always in control,
Yes.
that we need guidance and wisdom, and sometimes even a little bit of divine intervention.
Right.
But this story isn't just about leaders, is it? It speaks to all of us, regardless of our position or title.
Absolutely. This ancient story about a king and a census might seem far removed from our modern lives,
Yeah.
but the lessons it holds are timeless. the danger of pride, the importance of humility, the power of repentance and reconciliation.
Yeah.
These are all themes that resonate with us on a deeply personal level.
It's a reminder that we're all on this journey together, learning, growing, and hopefully becoming a little wiser along the way. So as we wrap up this deep dive into 2 Samuel chapter 24, what's the one nugget of wisdom you want our listeners to take away?
If there's one thing I hope you remember, it's this: embrace humility. It's not a sign of weakness, but rather a source of strength.
Wow.
It allows us to navigate the complexities of life with grace, integrity, and a willingness to learn from our mistakes.
Beautifully said. And on that note, we'd like to thank you for joining us on this deep dive into 2 Samuel chapter 24. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking wisdom wherever you can find it.
Yeah, it's like this sense that, there's rules and there's
Yeah.
consequences, and
Yes.
God is the ultimate judge.
Yeah, there is that thread of justice that runs through the whole narrative.
Right, but then there's also that overriding sense of mercy.
And that's where the hope comes in, I think.
Yeah.
It reminds us that, even when we really mess up,
Mm-hmm.
there's still a chance for redemption.
David could have easily just, said, oh, well,
Right, just kind of shrugged it off.
yeah, just shrugged it off. Said, okay, well, that happened.
Yep.
But he doesn't. He takes it to heart.
Yeah, he does.
He recognizes the weight of his actions.
Yeah.
And he seeks to make amends.
And that's a powerful lesson, I think, for all of us.
Absolutely.
It's not enough to just say, oh, I'm sorry.
Right.
There has to be some action.
There has to be a change of heart.
Right.
A genuine desire to make things right.
And what's interesting, too, is that this whole idea of repentance and reconciliation, it's not just a one-time thing.
No, it's a process.
Yeah, it's something that we have to continually strive for
It's a lifelong journey.
in our own lives and also in our relationships with others.
Absolutely.
When we hurt someone,
Mm-hmm.
it's not enough to just apologize. We have to also be willing to do the work
Right.
to repair the damage.
And sometimes that work is hard.
It is.
It can be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It can be painful, but it's necessary.
Yeah, and I think that's something that we often forget
I think so.
in our modern world.
Yeah. We want quick fixes.
Right, we want everything to be easy and instant.
Yeah. We want to just, apologize and move on.
Right.
But real reconciliation
Yeah,
takes time.
it does.
It takes effort.
Yeah,
And it takes a willingness to be humble.
which brings us back to that central theme of humility.
Exactly.
David's story is a powerful reminder that true strength comes from acknowledging our weaknesses
Yeah.
and seeking forgiveness.
It's about letting go of our pride and
Yeah.
submitting to something greater than ourselves.
It's like that saying, pride comes before the fall.
Oh, yeah,
And in David's case, it was a pretty steep fall.
it was.
70,000 people lost their lives.
Yeah, a heavy price to pay.
It really makes you think about the impact of our choices,
Mm.
not just on ourselves, but on the people around us.
And not just in the immediate sense, but,
Yeah.
those ripples can extend far beyond our own lifetimes.
Absolutely. So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive into 2 Samuel chapter 24,
Yeah.
what's one thing you hope our listeners take away from this story?
I think if there's one key takeaway, it's this, life is a balancing act.
Yeah.
We need to strive for excellence.
Right.
We need to set goals and work hard to achieve them.
Mm-hmm.
But we also need to stay grounded.
Okay.
We need to remember that our achievements
Yeah.
ultimately don't define us.
Right.
True fulfillment
Yeah.
comes from a sense of purpose,
Okay.
from connection,
Right.
from humility.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that we're all part of something bigger than ourselves.
Exactly. And that, when we get too caught up in our own little worlds,
Mm-hmm.
we lose sight of that.
Yeah, we can start to believe that we're the center of the universe.
Yeah. And that's when we make mistakes.
That's when we get into trouble.
That's when we start to lose our way.
So how do we stay grounded? How do we cultivate that sense of humility in a world that often seems to reward the opposite?
That's a great question. And I think there are many answers.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing I would say is this.
Okay.
Practice gratitude.
Mm.
Take time each day
Yeah.
to appreciate the good things in your life.
Okay.
The people you love, the experiences you've had,
Right.
the simple pleasures that bring you joy.
It's about shifting our focus.
Yeah. From what we lack to what we have.
And that's a practice that can transform our lives.
I think so.
It can help us to be more content,
Yeah.
more compassionate,
Mm-hmm.
more humble.
It's a journey worth taking.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive into 2 Samuel chapter 24,
Yeah.
I just want to thank you for joining us.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been a fascinating conversation.
Absolutely.
And we hope that you've glean some insights
Yes.
that you can apply to your own life. And
Mm.
we encourage you to keep exploring these ancient texts,
Yeah.
keep asking questions,
Hmm.
and keep seeking wisdom wherever you can find it.
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening.